Well, let's bring in Sven Harmeling from Bonn in Germany. He's the Global Policy Lead on Climate Change at CARE International. Sven, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme. We've seen Madagascar now and Tonga recently with the tsunami there. And it does seem like the poorest countries are getting hit the hardest. Is this very much the shape of things to come, unless, of course, we take action?
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's already basically the climate reality today for billions of people across this planet. Your previous contribution opened up with storms in Madagascar, and I remember that just 1 week before that, I received notice from a colleague working in Malawi about the severe floods that happened there, which caused some emergencies. And we're seeing this more and more across the planet, more and more disruptive extreme weather events, whether it's floods, whether it's heat waves, but also, wildfires, heavy snowstorms. And I think these are all consequences which climate scientists have warned against for many years and have projected. So that makes it even more urgent to take action now.
COP26 was just about 3 months ago in Glasgow. I mean, do the pledges and the promises made there in any way help the people of these poor countries getting affected? Or how can those pledges and promises be put into practice? And I imagine that's something that you work on a daily basis.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, we see these UN climate summits as very important elements in the global policy landscape to take climate action. But it's only one element. And what is, of course, more important is whether the governments who make these commitments really deliver on that. And that's part of my work and part of many colleagues in civil society to hold them accountable. And yes, for example, in Glasgow, we've seen new announcements that developed countries, for example, would double the finance support they provide to poorer countries on adaptation, which is basically preventing or preparing as much as possible for those impacts. And that's been an important step in the right direction. But we know that every year, basically, we need to hold those governments accountable, review and work on the national budgets, doing really these allocations and transferring more money to the global south. And just today, I read about an interesting poll that there's a lot of support in the public for basically increasing even further support to vulnerable and affected countries. But we need governments to deliver on that. But at the same time, it's also important that the governments in developing countries also see where can they identify better planning, where are some of the critical infrastructures that need to be preserved, and most importantly, where are the people invested into in their capacities to adapt. And in our case, in CARE's work, it's very important in particular to strengthen the empowerment and the abilities of women and girls who are often most affected to really take lead and develop and implement their own solutions.
Yeah, you mentioned adaptation in vulnerable communities, and I know that was a big theme of COP26. And we'll leave you with a tricky question, a very difficult one indeed. But what consumers do, everyday people in developed countries, what can they do to help support developing countries with their adaptation?
Well, I think, of course, we all have our kind of opportunities and responsibilities, including myself living in the global north. And there are ways where we can reduce our emissions, whether it's shifting to clean energy, to renewable energies, for example. There are also donations that can be made to organizations which support poor people and in their adaptation efforts. I mean, CARE is only one among many. But most importantly, I think this is not an issue which you can solve as an individual consumer, but it's mostly a political issue. And I think everyone has a possibility and duty kind of to raise their voices when they go to parliamentary elections, when they talk to their local politicians, to their parliamentary representatives, to really make clear that we are in an absolute crisis situation and we need to confront this crisis with appropriate answers, which includes national action domestically on reducing emissions, but at the same time also increasing support for those who are most affected by the crisis and who haven't really contributed to their causes.
OK, well, listen, keep up the good work, Sven. We really appreciate you joining us. That's Sven Harmeling there, a Global Policy Lead at CARE International.